Welcome to the Dog Trainers Podcast,
a podcast created by dog trainers for dog trainers or anyone who's ever fallen in love with man's best friend. Well, you want to know what's funny? So exactly like Mariano was saying, like you're echoing a lot of the stuff that we talked about in our last episode. And I just think that's because, you know, good ideas are, a lot of people have access to good ideas, right? And some of the things that we talked about, let's see, we'll just list them out to you real quick.
So here's something that we talked about that was like a more direct answer to your question. But before we answer the question, because I just have a quick question for you. Do you assign like homework to clients? You have like an email or something, a printout? No.
So this is, you're gonna love this. Okay, I very early on learned that a scripted email that I send to them will never get done. I make them fucking handwrite everything at the end of the session.
You do.
In the last 15 minutes, they handwrite every single note. And people, can you just email this? No, you will write this down. I don't care if you're 80, you're going to write it down, and you need to write this down because you need to understand it. And my words, when I send it to you, are not going to make sense, but I'm going to explain it and I'm going to have it step by step because I want this drilled into your head on how it should be done. And ever since we started doing that, and we get a lot of people who go, who talk about how much they enjoy, you know, hey, we can look back at our notes, right? And most of these people, especially families, not so much single families or older people, but you know, when you talk about a family with kids, they're going to put these on their refrigerator, right? And they're going to go back to, hey, remember, let's go look at our rules. And did we do this today, guys? Or hey, you know, maybe Vinnie said, oh God. Like,
Vinnie said, "You're the bad guy."
This one kills me, right? It's like when the wife says to the husband, or the husband says to the wife, "But Vinnie said, fuck with that dog trainer." It's like, dude, come on, you can't throw me under the bus. But I believe in my heart that because these people handwrite things down, they do it better and they do it more consistently and they remember it. So that's another thing that I really.
That's an interesting point, especially the notes part, because they may write something other than what you say, but just something that makes sense to them. I know exactly what you're saying, because whenever we have episodes of the podcast, whether we're interviewing someone or not, we have extemporaneous outlines, which is just a very basic like bullet point outline, right? And all the rest we just kind of freestyle it. And sometimes the notes that we have, they're misspelled, they make no sense. But we know what we're saying, you know. So like we're glad nobody can see these show notes because they're not great. But so. To answer your question then, if you were to just do that was the question, right? If you were to just do like one lesson when the dog went home, how much information would the owner retain? Probably not much, maybe 30%. I mean, if we're talking over like, let's say over like the next 3 days, probably like 60-70%. And then over the next like 3 weeks, probably like 40%. And it'll just drop from there. And you know, what's fascinating is, it's like a double-edged sword. There's just what they just didn't retain because you can only pay attention so much in an hour, especially when you're actively working with your dog on top of listening to the trainer. But also there's just, you know, Brent and I were talking about this in our previous episode. People have their own standards and their own expectations. And so sometimes it's like you want the client to make the heel look like this, and they're happy with it looking just better than it was. You know, just don't lunge after cats or whatever. And I'm cool.
Just don't kill something. Yeah, that's
exactly. Right. Yeah. And so it's hard for us, like something that I've really been working on. It's something that I've really been echoing to clients lately, is I tell people, listen, as a trainer, I have my standards. Like I have my ideas of what this dog could look like and what, you know, because I'm a competitive person. I like the dogs to look good, of course.
Right.
But this is your dog. And it's my job to work with you to come to a consensus of what I can get you guys to do that you're realistically going to want to do over the long term, because that's how we get success.
Boom. Yeah. So you have to come to grips with that as an owner or as a dog trainer, is that no owner wants a dog as good as you want a dog.
Right.
True. Yep.
And
100%.
that's hard, right? And especially if you're a competitive person, it's like, you know, this is where you just have to go, listen, it's not your fucking dog, Vinny. It's not your dog, Brent, right? It's their dog, and I'm going to get them as good as they possibly want their dog to get. And I will help them get to that point. But that point may not be to as good as I want to get. Can I ask you guys a question? Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Why do you guys do board and train versus just doing private lessons from your standpoint?
Well, you want to go first? You may go first.
Yeah, I'll go first.
Go ahead.
I do board and trains primarily because I feel that in some scenarios, other than, just having lazy clients, like I used to do board and train because it was convenient for the clients, but I put them to work now. Back then, again, the old board and train was like, it was more of like a ta-da, look what I did with your dog, and I hope you remember 30% of what I told you, right?
Right.
And nowadays it's like, okay, if I'm going to put this much work in, you're not off the hook, buddy. You're going to fucking learn with the dog, and I'm going to train both of you guys simultaneously. So when you guys go back home together, you don't fucking need me anymore. That's ultimately the goal. And so ultimately, board and train. Let's see, from a training standpoint, when it comes to creating a consistent product, I would say the consistent product of knowing how to learn, understanding markers, understanding cues, understanding, developing certain behavior, self-control, patience, that type of stuff. I think that's a lot more consistent in a board and train program, right? However, the downside is, the owner's desire to learn, right? What I've learned in the last year of doing you have to come to your sessions.
Yeah.
I can leverage the fact that they miss their dog to come and work with their dog, right? The fact that oh my gosh. And it's worked so well, and I'm using that power for good, because it's like, you want to come see your dog, you fucking come and you work with your dog. Versus, before it's like they would never come back for a follow-up. I'd be like, come and do a lesson with us. And they'd be like, nah, he's a lot better.
Let me check my schedule.
Yeah, people are happy with better, right? And one of the quotes that we did in our last episode that was, again, from Gary Vee. Gary Vee said, 100% of my clients do less than 50% of what I tell them to do, right? And when he said that, I was just like, yep. And so, people are paying him, millions of dollars for ad campaigns, and they do less than 50% of what they tell them to do. Right. And so what our prompt was in the last episode was, so let's assume an owner does 50% of what you ask them to do as a dog trainer. Is the goal to get them to do 60 or 70 or 80%, or is the goal to make the 50% that they do and that you do teach them, is it the goal to make that 50% better? Like the potency of that 50% of what you offer.
Right. Like 50% of what Michael Ellis says is better than 100% of what, most other dog trainers in the world will say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
now, can I change the question then real quick?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I think this is great for dog trainers here. And honestly, I'm being very selfish right now because I love hearing you guys talk about.
Yeah. I'm gonna pick your brain about your group classes, so don't worry. Just ask away.
And if I say 100% again, just fucking mute me, right? I get into the mode where
there's 100% is said 100% of the time in every podcast.
That says 100%.
100%. Yep.
Dude, if you made that shirt, I would wear it. Like that, and you should make a shirt because I think it would be hilarious.
Yep.
It should be like, "Don't quote me," in quotes with your name on it. That would be fucking funny.
100%. Don't quote
100%. But I'm sitting here having this conversation with you guys, and I'm thinking, son of a bitch, I wish you guys were around 10 years ago. You know what I mean? Just to pick your brain and listen to other people, just to listen to other people, how they run their business. So there's small details that I'm picking up from your guys. From you guys, I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to use this. This is now a learning experience for me, right?
Likewise,
Absolutely. So we'll go with it.
There you go.
100%.
Absolutely.
See, now
100%.
you put it in my head, so I'm going to say 100% from now on, just to like piss you off. But
trained you very well, right? But my question, Brent, is, I understand it from a training standpoint. Now, what about from a business standpoint?
Oh, yeah. So from a business standpoint, I think it's the biggest chunk of revenue at any given time. However, when you take into consideration overhead and you take into consideration rent and you take into consideration, I make less money per hour.
I was going to say.
However, for me, it definitely allows a better output of product, right? To have a reputation of a good output of product, right?
Actually, I don't know. I would dispute that a little bit because dog for dog, you make less per hour with a board and train. But the thing about a board and train is you can have several dogs at once.
You can have 10, 20, 30,
right.
It depends how many you get. That's when, after a certain number, the ratio is really
right. Like the ratio becomes, but there is this divot. You're 100% right about that. Like there is this point of, if you're like right on the cusp, like I used to tell my girlfriend this all the time because I've only been here in Arizona for 2 years and like 3 months. And I had to rebuild my client base from the bottom up. And actually, while I was at it, I was still taking on clients from LA. I would drive over there, pick up the dog, train him, bring him back,
Right.
But I would tell my girlfriend this, if we have just one dog in for board and train, it's almost like a negative. It's like, damn, because now I'm stuck at the house because I've got a dog that I'm taking care of and have to train, but I'm only making like one board and train's worth of money. If I have a dog in and then like 2 or 3 other dogs come in at the exact same time, then I'm like, yes, because I'm still stuck at the house, but now it's like worth it, right? But then you get to that point where it's like, okay, well, if you have like 9, 10, more dogs and you have employees and things, then you still have a little bit of freedom. Like I'll still sneak away for like 45 minutes and go do a workout or whatever. But, but you're still making a decent amount of money when you consider you have like this many dogs all at once. So like whatever the weekly rate or however you break it down times 10 dogs, it stacks up. But I'll tell you a big reason that I like to do board and trains, because I focused for a good while, maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, like before I left LA, I was more specialized in e-collar stuff because I was more specialized in dogs with certain behavioral issues for a minute. And something that I got really comfortable with telling clients who didn't know how to set boundaries for their dogs, which is often why the dogs had the issues that they had. And in fact, I just said this earlier today. I had an eval at 4 and we started this at 5:30. Was, honestly, guys, they have a shepherd, reactive, territorial around mom and dad. And I was like, listen, guys, I'll keep it real with you, because they asked me the same thing. Board and train versus privates. What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? I'm nervous to leave her alone. I'm nervous to let her go, and so on. And I'm like, well, check this out. I get you. And I promise you this. During very rare circumstances, like the dog's human aggressive or something, like I just, I'll just really insist on the board and train because it's safer for us versus coming into your house and like risking a bite and stuff like that. But short of that, if I, as a professional, think you'd be better off with a board and train, but you want to try privates, let's do it. I want to try. I want to give it a shot. And if you decide that I was right, then fuck it, let's go for it, right? And I'll just apply the difference to the board and train. But what I tell people, if they need to hear it, because it's our job to keep it real, is listen, man. I think, frankly, on top of everything else that I've explained to you, because the program will be what it is, whether it's privates or board and train. Like I'm going to teach the dog the same things, but I really think that this dog could use a break from you. And I'll be honest with you, I think you need a break from your dog too. Yeah. And like whenever I tell somebody that, they're usually like, yeah, I guess that's a good point. I guess I do this. I guess I do that. And it usually tends to be that moment where they're like, I guess I do put a little too much emotional baggage on my dog. Maybe I should just stop this or that. And I'm like, you see, and all I'm trying to do is give you guys a nice, clean little break from each other. You go and do your thing. You have some fun. It's a few weeks, whatever. And you're going to be here once a week anyway to see your dog. And we send updates on top of that, like videos and stuff like that. So it's nice to give the dog some distance from you and vice versa. And then you guys can jump up again fresh with a new skill set that both of you have, that both of you can pick up and run with. It's almost like rehab. It's like it's hard to rehab a really serious dog in the environment that's driven them to the point that they're at right now.
Absolutely, because the environment feeds the habits,
right,
and the habits feed the behavior. So I like that. I like that. And can I give a rebuttal or not a rebuttal, just my perspective? Because because there's trainers, the trainers that are watching. There's a lot of trainers. I mean, trainers now are popping up too. You guys see this. It's popping up all over the place, which is great. Right? It's like, once again, there's so many fucking dogs. I don't think anybody really is like, oh my God.
There's no shortage. There's no scarcity of dog.
Yeah, I wish all these trainers would stop. Just go.
Yeah, dude. It's insane how many dogs are out there. Insane, right? It's overwhelming. So the thing that I look at, like when you guys first started dog training, like I remember I told you I have the notebook, right? I have my first notebook from Trigger. And in that notebook, I also have all of my first sales for my first 2 years before I moved to a fucking computer, right? Like an actual civilian.
All your contracts.
Right? Yeah. She was like, Jesus, what am I doing? But I have, you have your first sales. And I was a 20-year-old kid. I remember my first year in business, I made 12,800 whatever bucks, right? And I was like, dude, this is great. In my second year, I grew, and it was I doubled, right? So I doubled we actually doubled our sales for, I think it was 6 or 7 years consecutive, right? Every year we doubled. So second year we're at like 25 grand. I'm like, okay, I'm doing great. My third year, I made $49,000. I almost made 50 grand a year, right? And I was thinking, I remember telling my dad, right? You guys remember the story about my father. And I remember telling my father, hey, Dad, I can fucking do this for the rest of my life, right? Because you think about, like, you're like, I can do this, right? And you're making a good living. You're like, 22 now, living at my parents' house, making a good living. The reason I bring this up is because from the trainers that I've hired from different areas, or from that actually have a training background, not just the other trainers that I've I don't want to use the word raised, but trained and so on and so forth.
Mentored,
yeah.
And that's a good word. Wow, that's
that I raised. You said to their family to you, I guess there.
Yeah,
you birthed them.
Wow. It's just weird. Isn't that weird? That's weird to think about, though, right? You know what I mean? You're their mentor. That's a fucking weird way to put that.
Yeah. I'm the youngest brother of my family, and I'm the big brother for a lot of my people I mentor. So it's interesting.
That's crazy to think about it that way. I guess I just never looked at it like that. It's kind of humbling. So, but the reason I mention that is, we pay our trainers, we pay our trainers very well. And I listen to other people who are, especially a few people that I've gotten from board and train programs in the past. And these people are not making what I would perceive as enough money. And they're not making enough money for the work that they put in. Now, this is all from my eyes, which is, I forget what the scientific term here is, but this is just a very tunnel vision view, because I know there's people out there who run private in-home training sessions who pay their trainers shit. I know there's board and train programs who pay their employees a very healthy wage, right? But it's like, I was always curious from that standpoint of how it worked financially for the owner of the business and for the trainers inside the,
Right, the trainers working under you. So there's a fascinating. You're right that there's a fascinating amount of like width in that department. So another interesting story, and like if I have something negative to say, I'm not going to name the kennel and name the trainers. There's just no need, right? But I will say this: here in Arizona, of course, I moved here, no client base. So first thing I did was I got a job. Right, I looked for kennels, and I was like, okay, well, let me hold myself over while I get my feet under me, build my client base up here, and then get back to doing Untamed. Right, so. I met with a couple different owners of different programs in the area, one of which, man, I just thought was ridiculous in all kinds of different ways. But one of the ways was they charge for a 2-week board and train, and there is no fluctuation. It's 2 weeks, period. We don't care, there's no option for more or less. And it's all e-collar all the time, doesn't matter, puppy, aggressive, whatever. So they charge, this shit is like robbery. Like they charge $2,200 or $2,400 in total for the 2 weeks. That includes the e-collar and stuff like that. The trainer who's training this dog makes $250 a week a dog. And this is what makes it worse though. Like Brent and I worked at a kennel where the dog stayed at the kennel, and and like all the overhead and all the risk and all the liability and all that stuff was there. We just kind of come in, train the dogs, deal with the clients. These dogs for this company go to your house. You're hired on as a private contractor, so it's your job to have your own insurance, your own everything, for $250 a week a dog, and you can only have 2 dogs at a time. And if they find out that you're training other dogs on the side, they will go after you legally.
Yep.
I was like, how is somebody supposed to make a living here?
But you're a contractor. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, yeah, and that's fucked up too. But
if you're stealing clients, I get that. But if you're just like if you're poaching clients, I understand. But
the way I perceived it,
but now when you're getting paid shit, so I get that,
dude.
Also.
Well, the way that I perceived it, just based on everything else, because they were also going through my history. Like, do you know how to train with this, and I was like, well, yeah. Okay, well, we don't use all that. We go straight e-collar. And they were, going through hypotheticals like, well, tell me how you'd walk this dog from beginning to end. And I go through it all. And they're like, well, we typically don't do this, this, and this. We just go straight to e-collar because we only have 2 weeks. And I'm like, why don't you do 3 or 4 weeks? But in any case, though, they paid these trainers, like, honestly, dude, they were telling me the reason why they're hiring, they were booked out like 4 or 5 months in advance. And mind you, I had just moved to Arizona. So I'm like, if you morons are this booked out, like, I can't wait to, but it made me sad almost because I'm like, whose trainers' backs are you breaking that are working? Like, I can't wait to poach your trainers because this is like stupid. Why would somebody work for? Go ahead.
That's
Sorry.
the thing. Yeah. Young trainers, you need to know your worth, right? You need, but now on that same token, because this is a very,
you also got to earn your stripes too.
You gotta fucking put your work in the trenches, right? Yeah. So when I say you got to know your worth, that doesn't, that does not mean that you deserve everything without working for everything, because I came and I come from a background, and I hope to God this background stays within the community of, you have to fucking put in the work, right? Right. Yep. Yeah. And when I say know your worth, that just means like, you shouldn't get treated like shit. Right. You know what I mean? You should never get treated like shit. And everybody hears horror stories. And I was curious. I appreciate the conversation more than anything else, just from a knowledge standpoint for me. And I know that I will be out west at some point, and I'm very looking forward to hanging out with you guys.
Come and hang out with us. I love that. I would love that.
Dude, so you're in the Berg. What's coming up? Maybe we can make it a point to go out and say hi.
Well, I mean, we're going to New York, but we can also do a trip to.
Yeah, stop in Philly because I hear it's nicer.
Fuck
yeah, exactly.
Thank you for listening to the Dog Trainers Podcast, a podcast created by dog trainers, for dog trainers, or anyone who's ever fallen in love with man's best friend.
We really hope that you enjoyed this episode and can't wait to be back with you guys. Be sure to follow us at Dog Trainers Podcast on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. And don't forget to punch the hell out of that subscribe button and leave us a review.
Remember, guys, this is your podcast. You're the best listeners in the world, and we'll see you next time.